Hello and welcome to the analysis of the Hindu newspaper dated February 24th, 2023. In this video, we are going to talk about two important newspaper articles which are going to be very important for the civil services examination. So let's discuss these particular newspaper articles without any further delay. So let's start with the first important newspaper article. Now, this particular newspaper article talks about the revenue increase or the GST revenues increase, which has now hit a record of 1.599 lakh crores in the month of January. How is this particular news significant for us? We'll talk about it, but first let's understand the context of it. Now, the India's GST revenues grew 12.7% in January to hit almost 1.59 crore, the second highest monthly collections on record as per the revised figures from the Finance Ministry. So these figures are directly coming from the Finance Ministry, and that is why they are very accurate, right? So earlier estimates of the GST revenues for the January had pegged at about 1.56 lakh crores, and now this particular revision has been done to 1.59 lakh crore, right? So based on the updated GST collections, the Finance Ministry's monthly economic review released on Thursday said the total GST revenues from April 2022 and January 2023 now stand at 14.9 lakh crore. So these are the revenue figures of the entire year. So these are 23.1% higher than the corresponding period of 2021 to 2022, right? So if you see the revenue figures of the January 2022, then they stand at 1.38 lakh crore. And for the January 2022 month, it stood at 1.49 lakh crore. And now in January 2023, according to the revised estimates of the Finance Ministry, they stand at now 1.59 lakh crore, which is relatively bigger number as compared to the other months in this particular financial year, right? So what are the factors responsible for it? So straight away, the domestic economic activity has remained more robust, though we have seen the global economic slowdown, but it has not impacted India so much, and the economy of India has been more robust, and this is the main factor responsible for such a revenue increase. And the review shows year-on-year growth in January's GST collections at 12.7%, which means that in 2021, if you compare the 2021 to 2022 to 2022 to 2023, there has been an increase in the GST revenue collections of 12.7 crores from what? Which translate to basically 1.1 lakh 1,58,891 crores compared to the collections of 1,40,986. So these are the comparisons of the January month for the last year and this particular year, which has increased basically by 12.7%. And the main factor responsible over here is the robust domestic economic activity, right? So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now, this particular newspaper article is very significant for us because India at this particular point of time is taking on the presidency or is having the presidency of the G20. Now, this becomes very significant for us to understand this particular organization, that is G20 or Group of 20. And why is this article important? This is important for the GS paper too, that is important international organizations. Let's first understand the context of it, and then we will define what is G20 and what is its importance. So we have 9 guest countries which have been invited by India to the G20 summit, and they have been asked or they have been expected to bring their own plans to the events, but they will be ultimately guided by the continuity of the G20, right? So under India's presidency, we have invited 9 guest countries. There are going to be guest countries which are 9 in number. These are Bangladesh, Egypt, Mauritius, Netherlands, Nigeria, Oman, Singapore, Spain, and United Arab Emirates. And they have been invited as what? Guest countries for the G20. And they are expected to bring their own agenda or their own guide regarding what is going to be the planning further, right? So what exactly is this G20 organization? G20 organization is an informal group of 19 countries and European Union, and that is why it is called Group of 20. And it has representatives of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank at as well, right? So the G20 membership comprises a mix of world's largest advanced and emerging economies, and together the G20 members represent more than 80% of the world GDP, 75% of the international trade, and we have 60% of the world population which resides in the G20 countries. This is the strength of it. 80% of world GDP, 75% of international trade, and 60% of the world population resides in this G20 countries. Now, how exactly G20 came into existence? It came into existence in the wake of the Asian financial crisis. During the Asian financial crisis of 1997 to 1999, it was realized that G7, which was earlier there, which has been from the earlier times of the developed countries like United States, United Kingdom, these form the G7 countries, right? So during the 1997 to 1999, it was realized that all the developing economies were also very important, and that is why a ministerial level forum which emerged after the G7 invited both developed and developing countries, and the finance ministers and the central bank governors began meeting in 1999. Now, until the 2008 financial crisis, only the finance ministers and the central bank governors used to meet. But during the 2008 financial crisis, it was realized that G7 was not capable of holding all the, or they were not able to contain the financial crisis, and that is why the G20 became to be more formalized, right? It became more robust. Now, to help prepare these particular summits, and since then the summits have been happening, right? They have been happening from the 1999, and during the 2008 financial crisis, we saw this particular organization becoming more robust, and it was decided that the G20 leaders would begin meeting once annually, and since then these particular summits have been happening for the G20. And to help prepare these summits, the G20 finance ministers and central governors continue to meet on their own twice a year, and they meet at the same time as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, how exactly this particular organization works? This particular organization works basically in two tracks. So the work of the G20 is basically divided into two tracks, and the first track is we have the finance track, which comprises all meetings with G20 finance ministers and central bank governors and their deputies, and meeting several times throughout the year. They focus on the monetary and the fiscal issues and financial regulations. And the second track comprises of the Sherpa track. Now, the Sherpa track focuses on the broader issues such as political engagement, anti-corruption. Now, we have the development, energy, all of these issues are being discussed in the Sherpa track, right? Now, each G20 country is represented by its own Sherpa, who is basically a very high level officer and who plans, guides, implements, etc. on the behalf of the leaders of their respective countries. Now, Indian Sherpa at the G20 in Argentina 2018 was Sri Shaktikant Das. You need to understand that. Now, these Sherpas basically decide the agenda of all the meetings that are going to happen, all the political engagements that are going to happen, all the anti-corruption bureaus that are going to be formulated. Now, this is how the G20 works. So, who are the members of the G20? So, basically the members of the G20 are Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the United Kingdom, United States, and the European Union. So these are basically the members of the G20, and Spain as a permanent member. Non-member invitee also attends the leaders summits. So what is the basic structure and functioning of the G20? So basically the G20 presidency rotates annually according to a system that ensures a regional balance over time, and for the selection of presidency, the 19 countries are divided into 5 groups, each having no more than 4 countries. Now the presidency rotates between each group. Every year the G20 selects a country from another group to be the president. Now India is in the group 2, which also has the Russia, South Africa, and Turkey. So this is the basic Structure and functioning of the G20. Now the G20 does not have a permanent secretariat or headquarters. So instead, the G20 president is responsible for bringing together the G20 agenda in consultation with other members and is responsible to developments in the global economy. Now you need to also understand that all the three countries are going to be there. They are going to form the Troika. Now the preceding country, the country which is holding the presidency, and the succeeding country which is going to hold the presidency form the Troika, and they basically set the agenda of what is going to happen in this particular regard in the G20 countries. So now what about the cooperation within the G20? So basically in Toronto in 2010, leaders declared it to be the premier forum for global economic cooperation, and the work of the G20 is supported by several various organizations like the Financial Stability Board, International Labour Organization, International Monetary Fund. We have the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, United Nations, World Bank, and we have the World Trade Organization. And these are basically responsible for the cooperation with and within the G20. Now the G20 also regularly engages with non-government sectors, such as the engagement happens between the business groups, which is known as B20, between the civil societies it happens, it is called C20. Then we have the between the labor organization that happens, it forms basically the L20, and it basically happens between the think tanks T20, youth Y20. You bet it basically, right? All of the organizations, all of the countries are going to basically engage in various ways in various non-government sectors as well, and this is how the cooperation with and within the G20 happens. Now what are the India's priorities in the G20 summits? Basically it is to check tax evasion, to fight corruption, choking for terror funds. Now we are also looking for cutting the cost of remittances, because India receives a lot of remittances from the other countries. Indian diaspora sends a lot of money to India. Now we need to cut the cost of the remittances. Then we have the market access for the key drugs. We also need that. Now the reforms in the World Trade Organizations are also important for us, and that is why the G20 basically checks on it. And then we have the full implementation of the Paris Agreement, which needs to be there, and that is the basic priority of the India in the G20 summits. So what are the strengths and achievements of the G20? Basically it is very flexible with only 20 members. The G20 is agile enough to make prompt decisions and to adapt to new challenges. Then it is also very inclusive. So the inclusion every year of the invited countries, international organizations, civil society organization leads to much broader agenda of it. Now we also have the coordinated action. The G20 has also played a crucial role in the strengthening the international financial regulatory system, including better coordination across the countries. And it has also facilitated an increase in the lending from the multilateral development banks of $235 billion at a time when the private sector's sources of finance were diminished. And this has led to these three factors, that is being flexible, being inclusive, and being coordinated in action, has led to G20 becoming the most important international organization. Now this particular international organization also comes with the challenges, as comes all the organizations in the world. Now there is no enforcement mechanism present in the G20. It is not even legally binding to follow all the decisions of the G20. There are also polarization of interest. Global North wants something else, Global South wants something else, this country wants something else, that country wants something else. And also the nationalism sentiment has taken over the whole world. Every country is thinking of their own, and they are not focusing on the global agendas, right? And this poses a threat to the G20 organization, right? Now nationalism sentiment is good, but it is somehow not very fruitful for the globalization, right? So these are some of the challenges which have been faced by the G20 countries. We have talked about the G20, its importance, its priorities, its members, everything we have talked about, right? So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article, and this is it for the day. Thank you from my side. Do like and share the video and subscribe to this channel. Have a good day. Bye.